The SEC saw 6 different head coaching changes, and the portal numbers from those teams are massive. Which teams did the best, and which ones are going to be around long term? Let's talk about it right here on the Portal Podcast.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
To the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast a part of your day, each and every day, right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. We're going to be going over all the fun stuff with the transfer portal and the SEC, specific to the teams that change coaches. And we're going to have some fun with it, the best long-term fits, some stuff in regards to which ones hit the portal the best and used NIL in a smart way to save themselves a little room for the high school ranks as well with the 2027 class, and just the new impact. Which guys and teams hit the ground running? There's different ways to look at this because there are different expectations. Arkansas doesn't have the same expectation as Ole Miss or LSU. But what about Auburn? What about Florida? What about Kentucky? Will Stein? There are a lot of different ways to look at this, and we're going to have some fun with it. And if you have any comments, fire away in the chat. We're going to be going over a lot of different stats, and I'm just going to have some questions and some thoughts. But just note that this is a lot of information. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you take nothing else away from this, I want to give a broader view of how teams are approaching the portal differently, so you can grade it also differently based on those teams. There is no one pure answer. With that, let's look at a couple of different coaches that did a really good job, not just finding a little guy here or there to kind of help, maybe a backup. A couple of guys that did it their way. And no, I'm not going to go with Lane Kiffin. I'm going to do an entire show, probably a couple on LSU. They got 40 players on on their transfer portal list. Lane Kiffin did a great job, but there are a couple other ways to look at this as well. Let me start off with Pete Golding over at Ole Miss. This is an interesting scenario because obviously Kiffin heads down to the Bayou and Golding takes over. He was the defensive coordinator. I've got a couple of questions about what they had going on. Number one, Jay Crawford comes over from Auburn, and I think he's a 3-and-out guy. He was a top corner at Auburn, started as a freshman, started again this last year. He was one of the best corners, not only in the Southeastern Conference, but in college football. Is he the final piece to helping Ole Miss get over the top? Like, they really struggled in key moments in the passing defensive category. They got better last year, absolutely. But he probably could have used Jay, especially on that last drive against Miami. They needed another showstopper. Is he that guy that gets them over the top? And of course, if Trinidad Chambliss comes back, it makes it a lot easier. On the other side of the ball for Ole Miss, this is where it's very interesting. Curious Kern is a player that I think is not just a good football player. He started as a freshman at LSU, but he is also a guy, this is so interesting to me, he is also a guy that has the talent to be a 3-and-out guy. And like, we've talked a lot about LSU getting players to come down from Ole Miss. Well, this is in reverse order. Curious Kern is going in the other direction. And to be really honest with you, there may not be a more important addition in the SEC than Kern heading from Baton Rouge to Oxford. So with that being stated, let me just put it in perspective for you. If Ole Miss has the ability to win big, it's going to be a lot to do with this position. Left tackles, or even if Kern ends up playing right tackle, they're hard to find. They're really hard to find. Here are his PFF grades for this past season. Again, he's got 3 years of eligibility left, but he could be a 3-and-out guy, elite recruit. So he played 306 snaps. He started about half the games. This is not a normal circumstance. 6'5", 320 pounds. Like, he played a little bit at right tackle, then he started at some at left. I'm very, very curious if Mr. Kern is the final piece to the offensive line puzzle, because they did pretty well there as well. And again, like, Ole Miss has a ton of guys that they've got coming in there aren't just a handful of players. They signed a ton of players. And in fact, Ole Miss signed 29 out of this group. LSU 40, Kentucky 29, Florida 26, Auburn 39, and Arkansas 40. So they all were over the 25 limit. Like the shortest group here is Florida 26. We'll get into that in a second. But if Carius Kern is that guy for the Rebels, can they be a top 5 team? I say yes. I think they're going to be one of the better teams in college football as it relates to the ability to really push the tempo. They've got a great running back. They've still got some really good receivers. I could see Ole Miss being that team that ends up being just absolutely dominant on offense. Again, we're still waiting on Trinidad Chambliss, but I'm gonna be very high on Ole Miss. I'm gonna do an Alex Golesh look here in just a second as well. But real quick, here are my fit rankings. This is just something I wrote down after studying all the stats that I studied this for 2-3 hours, going through portal numbers, looking at their track records, etc. From 6 to 5. I put Kiffin at 6 just because I don't really want to use him at the top. He could fit anywhere. He's obviously a chameleon, but he's from California as far as I'm concerned, because that's where he really got his roots. And I know he's lived all over the place. So he's a bit of a chameleon. I put him 6. But Ryan Silverfield at Memphis, now he goes to Arkansas. Does he end up being that guy? He could have been number 1 because at least it's close. But that's a big jump. And Arkansas has so far to go. I don't know if there is a good fit for Arkansas. Number 4, I've got Will Stein at Kentucky. He is a guy that grew up in Louisville, played at Louisville, so he's going to his rival. That's kind of interesting. But he was out at Oregon. He's coached in Texas. He's been away for a little bit from that area of the country, but he's very excited to be back in his home state. I think that's going to be a really, really interesting one. Alex Golesh and John Sumrall, I've got at the top, and I've went back and forth on which one should be the number 1. It's difficult, but before I got there, I've got Mr. Golding at number 3. Then I went Golesh number 2 and Sumrall number 1. And you really could have went any direction. There for a minute, I had Golding number 1 on this list, but he hasn't been a head coach. So it depends on your definition of fit. Is Pete Golding that guy? They had a nice run. They almost made it to the national title game. He's pretty good. Golesh, he's a part of the Tennessee coaching tree. I mean, they have a great offense. He was the main guy. He was a really good recruiter. He's got Auburn in the right direction. I think he's a fit socially. I think he's good. But the reason I picked Sumrall is he's been a head coach at multiple stops, Troy and Tulane in the South. He's recruited all the spots that Florida does, and it's easy to recruit there, but he's also still hungry. Like, this is his first elite job, but with substantial experience. It's a very small distinction. And again, you could have went with just whatever you wanted at that number 1 spot. I went with John Sumrall out of the fit category for the new SEC coaches. Take it for what it's worth. When we come back, I want to go into some more depth on some different things. I have some questions about Alex Golesh and Auburn. I want to break down why it's so hard. I'm going to use Auburn as an example. I've had the opportunity to do some crossovers with Zach Blackerby of Locked on Auburn. Have some fun with it. Is it that easy? Because you've not only got to get the talent, you got to save money for recruiting, for retaining your roster. No, it's not that easy. And we're going to explain why right here on the Portal Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda, and moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. If you look at college football today, there are a lot of players that kind of come up from just basically nowhere. Absolutely had no idea where these guys were at a year ago, and all of a sudden you see them on the screen and you're like, well, who's that? I think Florida might have found one of those guys. He just transferred in from East Carolina. His name is London Montgomery, a running back, just under 200 pounds. He had over 700 yards rushing this last year, and he's a guy that also had 7 touchdowns. Didn't get a shot early on in his career at a major program, but now he does because he is at the University of Florida. I think Sumrall is going to be a power football coach. Look for London Montgomery to make that move, and he's earned his opportunity after a couple of years at East Carolina. Congrats to that young man. And to that point, this is a great opportunity to just kind of show that hard work always pays off. And to that end, we put in the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there is more to you. All right. Thank you very much for checking out the Portal Podcast. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check down below the Everydayer Club right here on Locked on the Portal. If you take your pods on the go, grocery store, workout, long walk, drive, whatever it may be, you can spend $5 a month or $50 for the year. No ads on your audio. Absolutely none. And down in that description, they will also explain the Discord and all the other opportunities to check out stuff with the Locked On Everydayer Club. Check it out today. Let's talk a little bit about Alex Golesh and what's going on with Auburn. A couple of different points, but the first thing, like I mentioned, it is really hard to grade any of these because how much money did they spend to get there? Did they save enough in regards to what they need for the recruiting cycle that's coming up? How do you balance it? I was a little concerned about Auburn, especially early on, because they let some guys like Malik Blockton go, etc. But they also brought in some really good players. And at the end of the day, one of the keys for any team, offensive and defensive line, and Walter Mathis Jr. comes in, ironically, from LSU. He's a kid out of Savannah, Georgia, played 1 year at LSU. Now he's over at Auburn. So they basically trade. I think Blockton has got more upside maybe because he's a year older, so for at least immediate. But getting Mathis, it gives them a chance. Offensively, they got 5 transfers in from the USF receiver room. And, of course, they've got Byron Brown. Like they got their guy at quarterback that knows Alex Golesh's system. But the biggest questions for me are 2. They got 9 offensive linemen from the portal. We'll come back to that. And number 2, they got 5 portal D-line in totality. Is that enough on D-line? Possibly, especially with Mathis hits. They definitely need an interior guy to be somebody that can step up and make big plays. But let's start with the O-line. Auburn's offensive line has been in flux for the better part of a decade. Why? I don't know. But they have been. This should be, keywords should be, the beginning of the end of that, meaning there's an opportunity for Auburn now, hypothetically, to get a little balance this year. And then with some of the other young talent pushing forward, their depth chart at offensive line should be pretty good. But am I right? Because offensive tackle, that's not a lock. They've got a couple of guys coming in. One's from G6, one's from Michigan State. It's not easy to grade. And again, did they go 100% all out on retention? No, they didn't keep Malik Blockton. He ended up at LSU. And they probably could have spent a little more on defense, but they did keep their defense coordinator. So how do you grade that? I think it's very, very difficult. On top of it, and this is the part where it's just my opinion, it's year 1 with a staff that's coming from the G6. How are they going to manage things if it doesn't go well right out of the gate? I don't know. It's very, very difficult for me to see that being a lock that it's going to go good if they have any problems in the first month. Like they play the Baylor game in Atlanta this year. If they somehow lose that game, that just sucks the momentum out of your program. Can they recoup really fast, or is it going to take a while? Those are the kinds of things that will make it very difficult if you do not hit on that. Now, to that end, a couple other questions. Number 1, smartest out of this group with their NIL and transfer portal. I just went over Auburn and how hard it was intentionally before I asked this. I'm not sure that you can answer this without saying LSU because they had the most to spend, how that clearinghouse thing works, because they're obviously way over the cap in terms of how they did that. They can move money around, but I'm going to say LSU just because they spent the most. They probably had the best portal class. I mean, their class is just absolutely ridiculous. And take that for whatever it's worth. But I don't know how you can't say it's not LSU, number 1. Once they got Jordan Seaton, who I think is the best pure football player in the transfer portal, and for me, it was kind of locked up for LSU. He's going to be a 1-year rental, play left tackle for the Tigers, and then head off to the National Football League. We'll see how that goes. But they're in a pretty good spot. also from that group, like Arkansas got 40 guys, including Bryant Williams. He played at, I believe, Louisiana Tech. Offensive tackle, 6'7", 335 pounds. They found some value there. Auburn, Cole Best, offensive lineman. Notice there's a trend here, linemen across the board. The starting center from USF, really smart pickup because now you got him and Brown. They're going to know all the checks. They have all the stuff that they're used to doing with each other, and they're just changing schools. For Florida, a defensive lineman that I loved who's got 3 years left, Emmanuel Ayubadejo, 6'7", 295, and a defensive end. Like, if he can really play D end, I mean, his stats were not like unbelievable. He had like 5 sacks. If he's the guy that I think he is, Florida found a gem. Kentucky, they got Lance Hurd, the offensive tackle that was at LSU, transferred to Tennessee. Now he's transferring to Kentucky. I think he's an NFL player. That's a 330-pound mountain. They went out and spent. They want to be more competitive in football. Getting a future NFL left tackle, that's a really good way to do it. LSU, obviously, Seton. But another guy for the long term, I don't know if he'll start this year, but he'll at least challenge Jamar Jones. He's a kid who played at Archbishop Rummel. He's a local guy. He was G6 this past year. That's a player to watch. And then for Ole Miss, I already talked about Carius Kern. Well, they also got Tommy Kinsler, a kid I know out of Ocala, Florida, played at Trinity Catholic, went down to Miami for a few years. Now he's headed over to Ole Miss. That's another road grader. He's super athletic, super strong. They have a chance. With Tommy being at Ole Miss, that's another possible starter. So all these teams went and found linemen in one way, shape, or form or another. Some found G6 kids. Some took really talented guys that had to wait their turn, like Kinsler at the University of Miami. And now they're trying to roll with those guys and see where they can come up. Maybe some of them start, maybe some of them don't. But again, like Jordan Seton, that's as good a player as there is in the portal. So definitely a really, really good team down there in the Bayou. Let's go with a couple of other questions. Wins right away, LSU and Ole Miss. I think LSU's trying to find a way to the NCAA championship game. Same with Ole Miss. They're just waiting on Trinidad Chambliss. That was the easiest one. Smartest with the NIL and transfer portal. I'm going to go Kentucky because they went and spent more money. They had to eventually go that route. There was no way around it. And they did. Ole Miss, they finally got their corner in Jay Crawford. That really helped me. Carius Kern, and now just Kinsler. Like, they plugged some really big holes. Good for them. Best long-term fit. Again, I went through this. There's different ways to look at it, but let's just say that Silverfield ends up being that guy at Memphis. You could argue that for any of them. I never came up with one just definitive answer. What's your take on it? Finding linemen. Why is that so important? If you do not find linemen, if you do not find the guys that can come in and block and tackle, in the SEC, you get run out of there quick anyway, and the fastest way to do it is to get beat up at the line of scrimmage. All the teams that I studied, and again, I'll use Auburn as an example, 9 offensive linemen, 5 defensive linemen. You have to find linemen. That's the key. Who has the savviest long-term plan? This is one I've just put out there for question for folks out there. I don't think there is one definitive answer because we haven't seen them play yet. But the guy that I'm curious the most about is John Sumrall at Florida. They didn't take 30 portal guys. They spent to retain. I think, this is my opinion, that they're going to use some of their NIL and focus on elite high school recruits, combine it with some top-end SEC level linemen or whatever from other leagues. Sometimes guys get overlooked or they develop late. I think they've got a good balance, a good start. Watch out for the Gators long-term. And then just the hardest to define, again, is Auburn because of the 9 linemen. Like, that's incredible. They got that many on offense and then 5 more on defense. That's a really big part of how this all works. We're guessing to a certain degree, and we're not always going to know. But, man, Auburn taking 14 linemen, and you just go through all teams. It could be Big 12, Big 10, whatever. You're going to see a lot of this. It makes it very, very, very difficult. When we come back, I want to give some final thoughts on not just the portal itself, but why it's changing so much and how Indiana and Ole Miss show that you can use the portal if you do it very, very strategically and win big, but it's not easy. That is next right here on the Portal Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't about finding someone willing to take a job. No, it's not. It's about finding the right person in the right background who can actually help your business move forward. It's about fit. And if you find that candidate, with that match that you're looking for, well, you're lucky, but you're probably going to need some help. And that's where Indeed comes in. Indeed sponsored jobs is the move to get that done, because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post on some random job board, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria. It could be the specific skills, the location, certifications, anything else like that. It's really important. And it saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through all kinds of mismatches. Indeed does that for you, so you don't have to waste that time and you can make money. And here's the stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you once again for checking out Locked On the Portal. I appreciate you all being here. Here is my long-term take on the transfer portal in general. You can find different fits through G6, FCS. Look at Division II, Trinidad Chambliss. He was literally at Division II, Ferris State last year up in the state of Michigan. Then he comes to Ole Miss. It just shows you how wild it is. But you've got to be an elite evaluator. This is the new category for me. If you're not an unbelievable evaluator, I'm not talking about on film, off the field. If your back office is not unbelievable at finding all the little nuances that may or may not help your program with that player, sometimes you got to cut bait. That person, or maybe the people around them, they're not going to fit what you want. If you do not find those people to put in your back office to find all the little holes that somebody might have on their resume that maybe weren't included, you could get stuck with a big NIL bill and a lot of L's and be out of a job. So Curt Cignetti, obviously, he can evaluate about anything. He's tremendous. He was a recruiting coordinator for Nick Saban from 2007 through 2011. That's kind of the gold standard. But people say, oh, well, Indiana did it. It's not that easy. You've got to have the right people doing the evaluation, doing the coaching, doing everything, and then they bring in the players to see if they will fit what they want to do. Getting 18 to 23-year-olds to stick to a plan, that's not very easy, especially that 18 to 20 range. It's almost like herding cats. It's very difficult. How Cignetti did it, I don't know, but they have changed the bar. And now you see 6 different teams in the SEC bringing in a whole bunch of players. Of course, Kiffin is known as the Portal King. I think Pete Golden did a tremendous job at Ole Miss. They're both going to win this year. But Golesh, maybe with Byron Brown, they've got a difficult schedule. They go up against John Sumrall in their first SEC game, hosting them. The Gators head to the Plains early on next year. We're going to see some of those teams either figure it out or not right out of the gate. And you're going to know real quick. So will I. Did you find the right guys with the fit through your evaluations and your evaluations for your staff to do further evaluations? The people in the back office that handle the portal, that handle player transition, that handle the families and everything around it. If that is not elite at your favorite college football program, whoever it may be that you root for, the chances of that program being good, especially long-term, is next to nothing. This past season, Indiana kind of set that standard. And now constantly, wherever I go, whoever I speak with brings up the Hoosiers in that. And I know that some of these SEC schools are trying to copy it to a certain degree. And Kiffin's been working on that for a long time, but it's not that easy. So that's my last point here. Did you hire a coach? Or did you hire, if you already had the head coach, did he make the right transitional pieces in that back office to find the players and the family fits for your program? Because it's different for each school. Indiana did it with, I believe, 7 4-stars, and then a bunch of transfers. They won a national title, went 16-0. That's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. But now that that bar has been set, who's the next team to make that run? Is it going to be another underdog like Indiana, who's, before Cignetti got there, had the most losses in NCAA history as a program? Like, literally, Indiana was that bad. Well, we're going to find out pretty soon, but this is something to think about going into the offseason, finding those fits. We're going to dive into more portal madness, more transfers, quarterback rankings, recruiting rankings. We got junior days going on. There's all kinds of stuff going on here on the Portal Podcast. We will be back at a normal time at noon Eastern time on Wednesday, discussing more information. We're going to dive in a little bit more specific tomorrow. I'm going to start breaking down some of the different teams. Auburn, I'm going to do a little bit more with LSU, etc. Not sure which one I'm going to go with, but it'll be an SEC team tomorrow. Probably going to do LSU later this week and into next week. That's a big box project. I might need Matt Moscona for that one. That's really hard. We'll see if I can't get that, but I want to give my take on the SEC a little bit more. Maybe break it down like linemen, some of that area. But check it out tomorrow, noon Eastern. The Portal Podcast will do another live. She'll be back on a more normal schedule as my internet is back up and going. Thank you very much for checking out the Portal Podcast. We will see you again soon.